Hello, welcome to Hotline.
The Constitutional Court will deliver its ruling in the challenge to sections of the National Identification and Registration, the NIDS Act, which was brought by the opposition People's National Party. And that ruling will be delivered tomorrow, starting at 9:30 in the morning. So you'll be having all of the updates, all of the analyses as much as we can right here tomorrow on the hotline. As you know, the NIDS law was passed by Parliament in the face of a walkout by the opposition when the Holness administration failed to refer the bill to a joint select committee for deliberations. And so the legal challenge was brought by the PNP General Secretary Julian Robinson on behalf of himself, his constituents in South East St. Andrew, and members of the opposition People's National Party. Robinson says that some provisions in the Act abrogate, abridge, and infringe the rights of Jamaicans. The full court panel, consisting the head, Chief Justice Brian Sykes, the Honourable Mr. Justice David Batts, and the Honourable Mrs. Justice Lisa Palmer Hamilton. They heard submissions from the parties between October 22 to October 24 of last year. Now, interestingly, as we anticipate this decision, the Court Management Services in the Ministry of Justice issued a release saying the judiciary is aware of the high level of interest in the matter by Jamaicans locally and in the diaspora, and as such, the ruling will be streamed live on the internet. Live on the internet in real time. So this is massive. It's a first for Jamaica, and probably the first for any other court in the Caribbean outside of the Caribbean Court of Justice. I didn't get the chance to check that, but I don't remember hearing any Caribbean court having a live stream of their decisions. And this live stream of a court sitting, as you know, it follows the historic broadcast to the nation by the newly installed Chief Justice, the Honourable Mr. Justice Brian Sykes. He is the head of the panel, as I mentioned, who will deliver the decision tomorrow. In my view, it's a very new day in our development. I recall during the heights of the debate about his appointment and when he was named as acting Chief Justice, one of the questions I had at the time was, to whom should the judiciary account? It is very clear, or clearer to me now than ever, that this Chief Justice holds himself accountable to the people of Jamaica. He has repledged a timely delivery of justice and delivery of judgment in a very short period of time after trial, and in extreme cases within 6 months. Let me take a break and come back to Emily's views.
Emily's views, her position on the issues, her point of view backed up by the facts. Here are Emily's views.
Emily's views brought to you by Water, Land of Good and Water, and BPM Financial, taking you higher.
Thank you, listeners. Thank you, viewers. We're back with you. So, the Chief Justice has repledged a timely delivery of justice to all, which is part of the motto, the mantra of all courts in the land. As I mentioned before, the NIDS challenge was heard October 22 to 24, 2018. So that's October, November, December, January, February, March. Tomorrow is the 12th of March. So that's approximately 4.5 months since the hearing of this matter, which is a constitutional challenge, not one similar to any we've had in this jurisdiction before, and one on which they have to look to what obtains in other jurisdictions that would be persuasive. But even so, 4.5 months, the decision is ready. Signals to me the Chief Justice is leading from the front and imposing on himself, as he should, the timeline that he has set for the delivery of judgment after the hearing of a matter. So we'll watch and see what happens tomorrow, what the judges say, whether they're going to be unanimous. I know Justice Batts, for example, has always been big on human rights, and Justice Batts will ensure, I suppose, that we hear his view on this historic challenge. Yeah? So we'll watch and see whether there will be any dissenting judgment or whether the panel will be at one. The other judge on the panel, Mrs. Justice Lisa Palmer Hamilton, has just been elevated to the bench, and she has a very strong background coming from the prosecutorial arm of government, the office of the DPP. It would really be interesting to read her take on this massive challenge that she has heard. But we will all watch it here, scrutinize it, analyze it for you on the hotline tomorrow. The other thing in my thoughts today, the tragic murder-suicide along Waltham Park Road yesterday. What an absolute tragedy. And both papers, as expected, they have that story on the front pages. In the Observer in particular, the Observer says that the wife's father, Melford Clark, who sat among the relatives, alleged that the man who has now killed the wife and killed himself had threatened to kill the wife some time ago, and he told her to leave the house, which she did. In fact, the father said he'd gone to Waterford police station and made a report to the police about the threat by the husband to kill the wife. The father explained that when he made the report, the man's firearm was seized. He went on to question and to be surprised that he was given back the firearm, even though in his view, the threat remained. And so I would love for us to ask further whether this report is accurate. And if it is accurate, under what circumstances did the police give back the weapon to a man who was clearly walking, intending to self-destruct and to take his wife down with him? How did this happen if the father's reports are accurate? And I can only send lots of love and hugs and warmth and prayers and covering with the blood of Jesus and whatever it is that is there for this little girl who is just days away from her 13th birthday, who has had to witness the shooting of her mother by her father, and now to be without both parents and yet still having to live and try to be happy as a teenager. I can only imagine the hole that she will be placed in emotionally, and the complete displacement and the uprooting of all of the circumstances she's known thus far. And we pray for her continued guidance, in a difficult time, as we do for all of the children who've had to watch women or men be abused in relationships for a long time. Some of those children don't even come to understand that it is unnatural, it is cruel, it is crude, it is wrong. And they end up growing into adults who become themselves abused or abusers. because the cycle perpetuates itself. We'll keep watching it. Finally, in my views, Damian Crawford remains in East Portland. Beautiful move, Damian Crawford. And in the extracts I heard in the 6 and 7 o'clock news on RJR, I think, if anything, there's a softening of Damian Crawford's tone. Damian Crawford is understanding that in the face of defeat is when you're to put up your greatest challenge. And as he said, the lesson to the children, when you fail, you must try and try again. But you mustn't try the same way. You have to tweak the message. You have to tweak the messenger. You have to soften the messenger. You have to let the messenger understand the people he's dealing with. And he's now allowed time to plant seeds in the constituency politically, and perhaps time to watch them mature. And it's going to be exciting election night, the next year and a half, 2 years, to watch the ballots coming from the divisions in Portland Eastern, with Anne-Marie Vaz again up against Damian Crawford. To think that with all of the excitement of the last by-election, we will have the chance of doing this again in a year and a half, 2 years. It can only be good for the people of Portland Eastern. Anne-Marie Vaz will have a chance, and undoubtedly the Jamaica Labour Party that made so many promises of roads, particular highways are supposed to start. She will have a chance to demonstrate to the people whether there is immediate scope for her to deliver on some of those promises. Not all of them will be complete action. They will be inchoate, an attempt to, or near completed, but she has to demonstrate in language acceptable to the people of Portland Eastern that she is willing to do what it takes to reverse the deficits of the last 30 years for the PNP. If not, Damian Crawford will have a greater chance in the next election. It's too early to say what will happen, but good move, Damian Crawford. Good move, PNP, in having him stay there. And we will watch to see how Anne-Marie Vaz develops into a member of parliament and up for the challenge for the next election. Those are my views for the moment.
Join us next time for Emily's Views on the Hotline.
Emily's Views brought to you by Water, Land of Good and Water, and BPM Financial, taking you higher.
Thank you, listeners, viewers. We're back with you on the Hotline and Hotline interface. So the Electoral Commission of Jamaica has engaged the private sector on the recently enacted law governing the funding of election campaigns. Under the theme, Campaign Financing, Responsibilities and Implications for Candidates and Contributors, the ECJ outlined the legal regulatory framework during the PSOJ's President's Breakfast Forum at the Spanish Court, which was recently held. And we're told that Jamaica is the first Caribbean country to implement election campaign financing law, and that came into effect a short while ago. So the new legislation requires political parties and candidates report not only their campaign expenses, but declare their sources of funding. Similarly, contributors to political parties and candidates are required to declare their contribution towards the financing of election campaigns. So Dorothy Pine McCarthy, the chairman of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, said the law is designed to promote transparency in the financing of election campaigns. Now we are joined in studio by LaFawn Thompson, who is a registrar of political parties at the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. So good to have you on Hotline and Hotline Interface.
Thank you for having me.
And I have Colleen Wallen, who is Director, Legal Services at ECJ. Welcome, Ms. Wallen.
Thank you, Emily.
And on the
good morning to
telephones,
you.
thank you, we have President of the PSOG, Howard Mitchell. Happy to have you, Mr. Mitchell. Good morning. We'll get his volume up in just a moment. Right. Let me just begin with you, Lafron, Registrar of Political Parties. Explain some more about that function for me.
The Registrar of Political Parties is the officer assigned by the Electoral Commission to oversee the registration of political parties and also to monitor election campaign financing. This person looks over the declarations that are filed by political parties and candidates and gives report as of the political parties and candidates' compliance with the electoral law.
Okay. How many political parties we have now registered?
There are 2 registered political parties.
Only? What happened to NDM?
Currently, there are 2 political parties which are registered.
But what happened to NDM? Have they dropped off the books?
They're not registered with the Electoral Commission.
But this is massive. I thought they were around still.
Perhaps they still exist, but in terms of registration under the new law,
Yes.
they are not one of those parties that have been registered formally.
And the registration, is it a one-time registration or it's renewable?
It's a registration which takes place at the outset, and each year,
Yeah.
subsequent to their initial registration, they'd have to renew their declare that they continue to exist as a political party.
You remember when you had their last declaration?
Well, the law speaks to declarations by registered political parties.
Yes.
So in terms of the applicability of the laws as we are currently at,
Yes.
the NDM really has no obligation to be making such declarations.
Because it's not registered.
It's not registered. Neither do they posture as independent candidates.
Yes.
Unless they do so, then such a candidate has a responsibility
Yes.
to submit at the end of 6 weeks after an election in which they're a participant,
Yes.
such reports.
Oh, so the NDM is really dead. We have to follow up on that because I know that they have been saying anything, listeners, viewers, but I didn't realize that they're not registered with the ECJ, and we really only have 2 at the moment. Yeah? That's interesting. Anyway, so you say look at declarations and you look at whether they are
Compliant with
compliant
the electoral
with the law.
laws.
Yeah. Let's go to the law now. Ms. Wallen, help me with that and tell me some of the salient sections in the law that we need to focus on. Firstly, what is contribution under the law?
Okay, a contribution is defined as any gift of money or any benefits that can be computed in terms of money that is given to a registered political party or candidate for the purpose of carrying out political activities of the registered political party or for the election of a candidate.
Simplify that a bit for me now. Gift
So
or money?
any services, anything that is given that can be computed in terms of money that is given to either a registered political party or a candidate is considered to be a contribution.
Okay, so if somebody says on election day, I will pay for transportation of 100 people to the polling stations, you would want that quantified in money.
Yes.
Yeah. And when that is quantified in money now, Ms. Thompson, help me and tell me what happens. How is that reflected in the declaration?
First, I should say, if the effort to pay for something on election day to transport your supporters, let us point out that 24 hours before an election has commenced, it is when a campaign period ends. So all contributions related to a campaign period should have been submitted or accounted for at such point.
So let me understand this. The only way the cash value for the transportation cost for transporting these 100 people can be part of my declaration is if the person asks me 24 hours before election day and I say, yes, I will cover that cost.
These contributions are accounted for up to the point of 24 hours before an election commences. That is when the campaign period ends, and contributions to a candidate,
yes,
it's allowed during that period for his election campaign.
So anything, the day of election, from the morning of election to the end of the voting day, whatever contributions the candidate gets in that period, it's not counted in this.
It is not within the campaign period, however.
Yes.
It applies within what is called the reporting period. And the reporting period extends to 181 days after an election.
181 days after an election?
Yes.
But why would they, this wouldn't take the day of election though, Ms. Thompson. The 181 days after, the election day itself cannot be considered a day after the election, since the election has not yet happened. Has the law included it in reporting period, the election day?
The reporting period begins at the very moment that an election is announced. So it takes in the campaign period,
yes,
and 181 days after an election, up to 181 days.
Oh. Okay. So it takes in the announcement for election day and nomination day, and that is usually about what? About 3-4 weeks, could be. Okay. So any time from announcement up to 181 days after an election is reporting period.
It's a reporting period.
And the declaration now about contribution would need to cover what period? What is the campaign period, Miss Wallen, for the purposes of the declaration about the 15 million that you get? What's the campaign period?
The campaign period starts on the day on which the announcement is officially made for the calling of the election.
Yes.
And it expires 24 hours before the day of the election. That is known as the campaign period.
Election day announcement to 24 hours before election day.
Yes.
And it is this period that the campaign financing declaration would relate to, Ms. Thompson?
No, declarations must show all contributions that you would have gained for the period, from a campaign period extending up to 181 days after.
Okay. Okay. And I understand from the law that the ceiling that is allowable under the law for each candidate is $15 million?
$15 million, right.
So they really should be spending no more than $15 million from election day announcement up to 121 days. 181 days after election?
The account of your election expenditure
Yes.
should not exceed $15 million. However, you in terms of receiving contributions toward your campaign, the campaign period is covered from the date of the announcement of an election up to 24 hours after. Political parties and candidates have a responsibility to report all aspects of their financing, contributions that they gain from contributors towards their parties up to 181 days after. That is when it becomes due for submission to the commission. All contributions that you would have received toward your election campaign.
Okay, so I could, from the date of the election announcement up to 24 hours before the election, I could have really had donations and whatever else of, say, 13 million. But after election, particularly if I'm successful, up to 181 days after the election, donors could still be coming into me and giving me money for next election. Let's say the donors give me money over, say they give me 5 million. So in total for that period, I'll be looking at about 18 million, which would be 3 million over and above the 15 that you say my account should not exceed. What do I do with that?
Okay. In cases where the commission recognizes that a candidate would have exceeded the limit of election expenses,
Yes.
what is allowed are administrative fines not exceeding the sum of $1 million that the commission has purview to enact or to recommend if there's cause for criminal prosecution to the DPP to raise those charges against an individual.
That's interesting. We have to come back to that. Because the person who is giving me money, they wouldn't necessarily know whether I'm close to this $15 million accounting limit or not.
The person who is making a contribution, their responsibility is to declare their contribution. Let us say they contribute $250,000 or more.
Yes.
Having done so, you have the responsibility to declare your contribution to the political party or candidate. And in addition, if you hold a contract which is valid of $500,000 or more for up to 2 years prior to making your contribution, then you have to declare to the commission that you have given this contribution over to the party. The responsibility is not on the contributor to say whether the party or the candidate is within limit. That really rests with the candidate or the political party. So the commission then would look to investigate, to have argument with the political party or candidate as of their compliance with the law.
Yeah, but my issue is, I don't see any political candidate being so meticulous so that at every step of the way they know how much they're getting in donors in contribution, how much they're spending from date of announcement down to election day. Invariably, that kind of computation is going to be done after the election is done. But they can run into problems because not knowing where they are from day 1 down to day 25 or day 26, people might come and say, I'm giving you $3 million. I'm going to declare it because I'm duty bound to declare it. The candidate also declares it. The candidate then computes and realizes he or she is over this $15 million limit and could land him or herself in criminal prosecution for that.
Okay. At this stage then, we have the laws in place, and political parties and candidates are aware of the dictates of the law. At this stage, I believe they have a responsibility to be monitoring along the way themselves to say that they remain within the confines of what the law requires of them. We cannot provide an excuse or look to justify how they may go over. We're really looking to see that you have complied, and in the case that you have not, then we begin to argue as of what are the penalties, the consequences for having gone over.
In the alternative as well, Emily, might I add that the political party can receive contributions. Their limit goes up to $630 million. So I'm of the view that in the event a candidate is in excess of the 15 million, perhaps they could say to the contributor, make the contribution to the party.
Very interesting. Howard Mitchell, president of the PSOJ, happy to have you join us on Hotline and Hotline Interface.
Happy to be here.
Your thoughts on what you're hearing just now, and don't tell me you know it because you partnered with ECJ for this launch and so forth.
My thoughts?
Yes, your thoughts on what you've heard so far.
I think it's a good start. I think we have to start somewhere. I think we have to acknowledge, as the Prime Minister did some weeks ago, that while Jamaica, in comparative terms, has some excellent institutional framework established, good laws in relation to areas that many of our other comparable small island developing states or small countries don't have. We do not yet have the full capacity to enforce all of that institutional framework. And so we have to start somewhere. And this is why the private sector, in this particular case and in other cases that we can name, is trying to work very closely to break down that typical traditional barrier between the public and the private sector, to work closely together to see how we can best accommodate and enforce and make it become a cultural practice that people obey these laws. Because all of these relate to development.
Right.
All of these relate to growth. All of these relate to having a mature economy that is inclusive and beneficial to all our citizens.
Let me ask you then,
We
Mr.
recognize
Mitchell,
the limitations, but we're working with it. Yes, go ahead.
do you know, are your members aware now that in this new dispensation, whatever contributions they make to a political party, they have an obligation to make a report?
Well, let me say this. That, I mean, first of all, I define the private sector as anything that is not the public sector.
Yeah.
Right? So I can't tell you if everybody in the private sector is aware of this. What I can say is that we have made every effort to disseminate the details of this law to our members in the private sector organization of Jamaica. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
We know for a fact that several of our members have told us that they have made contributions, and a number of them have in fact reported those contributions to the Electoral Affairs Commission.
Right. All right. Let me just.
So we know that there's a practice started.
Right. Just before I come for some more understanding as to how the two-way reporting would go from LaFron Thompson, I know we have a culture of not wanting to say that we contribute to political parties, Mr. Mitchell. How is that particular culture impacting, if at all, this private sector with the new reporting requirement by law? Mr. Mitchell, are you there?
Are you hearing me? Hello?
I'm hearing you better now, yes.
Right. I say we know that in the last electoral event, right, it is highly likely that much more than $15 million per candidate were spent. Okay? Just from empirical observation. So we know that we're not perfect. Secondly, we acknowledge the existence of that culture of which you speak. So what we're trying to do by moral suasion is to get our members to change their ways. And because where it is starting is with our publicly listed membership, that they are more into the culture of governance, so that we find that those are the people who are moving towards compliance with this law. It is a harder task to get private individual companies to move in that direction. But we are starting, and the forum was the first step, and we will be speaking to our membership, reminding our membership as we go along.
Yes.
Because there's another event coming up, I'm sure, soon.
Yes. All right. Let me come to LaFron. Explain the two-way reporting again. So a member of the PSOJ or some private person contributes 10,000, 5,000, whatever sums to a candidate. What happens?
Contributions in excess of $250,000 must be declared to the commission using the appropriate forms, declarations of contribution.
So the contributor needs to fill out that form.
Right.
In excess of 250,000.
Right. For services, monies that are given over, which are of $10,000 or more, what needs to be provided is a statement of the value so given. And if that is not provided by the contributor, the political party or candidate must see to giving out a statement of receipt, we have termed it, to say that I received this. So therefore, if I bring to you $10,000 or I'm giving you a service or some kind of gift, that the market value will be $10,000 or more, I must either issue to you a voucher, an outline of what this would have cost and what it is. If I've not provided it, you must say, okay, thank you, but let me write it up and say, I've gotten this from you.
So if I give you 20 cases of water and I don't give you a receipt,
if it's valued at 10,000 or more, I must outline in my account of expenses that I incurred as a candidate that I received this 20 cases of water that was valued at 10,000 and report it within my final disclosure report. Let me say, contributions to a political party by any one contributor cannot exceed $31.5 million to include any contributions that is given to a candidate of that party. And if
No, say that again.
contributions from
Yes.
any one contributor
Yes.
to a political party shall not exceed $31.5 million to include any contributions given to candidates within that party.
Okay.
If contributions
And this is over what period?
during the reporting period.
Okay.
So Emily,
And-
just to revisit, just to revisit the first point, when what must be declared, anything that is done during the reporting period.
Okay.
So it doesn't. So if you make a contribution on the day of election, it must be accounted for, and that contributor, if it is in excess of the $250,000, must make a declaration.
So what's going to happen now? With no election coming up, Andrew Holness is the only one who can call the date. And he knows the moment he makes an election date, the campaign period and the reporting period will start running. So he may say to his donors, or any prime minister, when he said to them donors, weeks before, bring in the dough now, because we're not in the period. So it can be put down. Bring in the water, bring in the bag juice, bring in the curry goat, bring in the rice, and let's stockpile them. We have them before so they're not covered in the period. And we get around the law, Ms. Thompson. Isn't that part of what's going to happen?
Let me say that political parties that are registered also have a responsibility to submit their financial reports, and what is submitted there should be balanced as against the different periods of contribution.
Okay.
And we should see
Yes.
that what is reported for the election campaign occurs during a reporting period.
Okay, so you have a financial report separate and apart from the declaration for the campaign period.
Right.
And let's go back to the 31.5 million that the maximum a contributor can give to the political party and the candidate during the campaign period.
Right.
So if they give me 31.5 in that period, they could still during the calendar year give me some more without floating the campaign financing law, couldn't they?
They could, because contributions to a political party, it's for maintaining the functions of the party.
Yes.
And a reporting period in respect of an election campaign operates for the period of a campaign period
Yes.
and extends to 6 months after.
Okay, so you're on the point now about the two-way reporting. So one contributor can't give more than 31.5 million to a political party and or candidate during the campaign period.
No, to
The candidate.
To
Right.
To include the
contribution to the candidate.
Yes, yes.
Because the limit of contribution to a candidate is $1.5 million
by any one contributor.
by any one contributor.
Okay. So if you can give the candidate 1.5, give the party 30 million
Right.
to fall in the 31.5.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So when the contributor makes his contribution over 250,000,
Right.
he then has to fill out a form.
He has to submit a declaration of contribution, and if his contributions are split up, so to say, and if in the
Yes.
aggregate they amount to 250 or more,
Yes.
they must report each sum given, even if it is less than the $250,000.
So if he is giving to three candidates, one is in receipt of 100,000, the other
Yes.
is in receipt of 100,000,
Oh.
the third is in 100. That's a total of 300. So even
Oh.
though each contribution is below the 250,
Yes.
he still would have to make a declaration for that contribution.
Okay, because it's over 250.
Because it is over 250. So even though he would
Yes.
have been giving less than 250 to each,
Each,
when it
right.
aggregates, it's more than the $250,000.
You know, I can add too that a contributor, because his limit is 1.5 million to any one candidate, he can give more than one contribution of 250,000 to make up that sum, right? He doesn't have to split his multiple contributions between other candidates.
So when he, with his splintered contribution to maybe three candidates, coming up to 300,000, when he makes his mandatory declaration because of his quantum, then each of those three candidates who would have received, say, 100,000 each, they would have a corresponding obligation to say, John Brown on X date gave me 100,000.
in how you've said it there, really, breaking up, there's no need to break up 250,000 if you're giving it to one candidate.
Right.
And if you've broken it up your small sum of 250,000 to spread across 3 candidates, there's really no need to declare right there. What you...
No, I thought we said that the contributor would need to declare because the contributor is giving 250 or over.
Right, but in terms of splitting it into 150 and then 80 and maybe 20, there's no need to use a declaration of contributor there. What the candidate must do is issue that invoice or statement of receipt that he would have got because the sum is less than 250,000.
Okay, so the candidate would issue the invoice. Okay, and then the declaration that the candidate signs. This is the traditional voluntary declaration on the Voluntary Declarations Act, kind of, where you have to swear in front of a JP.
The declaration that he has not received any impermissible contribution.
Right.
Yes, to that effect.
So it's on oath.
It is.
Yes.
To the best of my knowledge, I have not received an impermissible contribution. And the form is there outlined in the regulation.
And declaring things that turn out to be untrue. It's on the pain of perjury or some criminal prosecution.
For false declaration.
For false declaration?
Yeah.
What we're looking at in terms of penalty, do you have those details?
Yeah, it's $3 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 12 months.
Yes, another donor will pick up that 3 million tab. Yeah? But at least it's punishable, and 3 million is, I suppose, the public condemnation if it's found out is also pretty interesting.
Right.
Time is up on me in this segment. I want to continue, so I think we're going to have to come back because now, with this Portland Eastern by-election, when is the first date for the due declaration in this one, Ms. Thompson?
For persons who would have contributed, say, up to April 3rd, if you held a contract prior that is of value 500,000 or more, then you have up until April 17th, 14 days after, within which to submit that declaration of contribution to the Commission.
Let's talk again. Very interesting. We're going a far way in Jamaica. Can I thank you both? LaFron Thompson, Colleen Wallen, PSOJ President, Howard Mitchell. Thank you. We'll talk again. Yes, we'll keep talking. Let me call you back because I'm up on headline. I'll call you right back so you can finish on Hotline. Take care. Have a great week. I'm Emily Shields.